There are several terms frequently used in criticism that bother me. Not because of their meaning necessarily, but because the terms are often used as negative descriptors when that's simply not always the case. One of these is slow. You know, when someone says that they didn't like something because of its slow pacing. And yet, while certain shows like Kill la Kill benefit from a fast pace, there are plenty that benefit from taking their time. For example, some might argue that The Shawshank Redemption, one of my favorite films, is slowly paced. And they wouldn't really be wrong. Many of Frank Darabont's works have a slow burn style to them. In this case, it's simply that the film is methodical, that all the pieces are carefully put in place. The same goes for something like Monster, where we're slowly fed information about a complex mystery. Another one of these terms that bothers me is edgy. Now, let me get this out of the way. I've also used terms like edgy and slow pacing to try and quickly explain away my issues with a series. The problem with that is that it's lazy and that it doesn't really say much, so it's something I try not to fall into now. For example, someone might say that a manga like Tokyo Ghoul is edgy and therefore bad, or that only edgelords would enjoy it. Now, there's no problem with not enjoying that story. I personally didn't enjoy it all that much, to be honest. But if you say it's edgy, there's little room for discussion. It's just a buzzword that shuts down the conversation and it exemplifies lazy criticism. Let's keep going with Tokyo Ghoul. Couldn't someone, instead of saying it's too edgy, say that some of the outlandishly dark scenarios the characters find themselves in make the story feel less real and believable? Of course, I'm not saying that these are great criticisms. They really aren't, and I don't even agree with them myself. But at least there's room for discussion here. This can serve as a launching pad into a back and forth about theming, characterization, tone, dramatization, dialogue, genre, and so on. This really leads to one question. What does edgy even mean? Is it too much of something? Too much violence, maybe? Or is it subject matter like rape and torture? Is something only edgy if it's gratuitous? But when does something become gratuitous? Here's what I think. Edgy is generally used to describe one of two things. First, that which makes the viewer uncomfortable. Second, that which is meant to make the viewer uncomfortable but is instead so extreme that it makes you just laugh or roll your eyes or something like that. It's totally fair to decide that you aren't going to watch a show because it makes you uncomfortable. I have a friend who didn't keep watching Devilman Crybaby because he found the violence and sexual content to be too much. Specifically, they felt that the plot didn't justify its extremity, meaning that they saw no narrative purpose in it. You know what? Yeah, fair enough. It's not for everyone, and we can discuss what purpose this violence and sexual stuff might have in the show. The conversation hasn't ended. Besides, he's not going to make a video about it. He just wants to find a show that he'll enjoy. Still, these extreme things aren't an inherent flaw with the piece of media. Some people find violence intriguing while others find it off-putting. Some find sexual content titillating while others find it gross. Some find large amounts of swearing or other forms of extreme dialogue realistic while others find it distracting. It's all subjective. Now, for the stuff that elicits what may be perceived as the so-called incorrect response from the viewer. This one is trickier. After all, in some cases, that different type of enjoyment is no less enjoyable. Maybe the whole show was supposed to be scary, but instead you find it funny through and through. Who cares what you think it was supposed to be if you enjoyed it? Besides, who can say what the intended result was? Sure, we can use some context to try and discern that, or to conclude that something seems out of place in its story. But it's the death of the author, baby. We just don't know. Even if a creator says that this meant that in an interview, what about all the other people who were involved in the project? What difference did they create by doing their job? Individual projects are similarly susceptible to our faulty memories. To put it simply, we don't necessarily know why we're doing what we're doing while we're doing it. Never mind when we're looking back. That's without even touching on the sign, signifier, and signified stuff on good dudes like Saussure and Barthes. The whole edginess issue has come into my mind recently because of this anime called Goblin Slayer, which has a rape scene in the first episode and features a dude slaying evil goblins. And now lots of people are saying that it's lazy writing to have the villains raping people be the first way we're made to hate them. While there are obviously other ways to get your audience to hate evil characters, I fail to see how rape is an invalid way of doing this. Rape is a real problem that real people encounter, so why should it be off limits in fiction? To be fair, I know that many people's issue with this scene run deeper than that, and you didn't watch this much of a video just to have some guy beat on a straw man. Some don't like how this scene itself was handled. They see it as being too overtly sexual. For me, the fact that this scene didn't shy away from showing a bit of stuff just made it more grotesque, which certainly seems like a reasonable response to elicit from your audience. But if you think it would have been just as effective to not show as much, yeah, fair enough. Still, it's not like showing a little bit is inherently bad or lazy storytelling, though. However, what is ridiculous is to spread the idea that the show's take on this is worse than a lot of porn that involves rape. That's just not true. I mean, I'm not an expert on this stuff, but good old Mother's Basement, a big anime YouTube boy, said that it gave something called Metamorphosis a run for its money, so I decided to investigate that one. Yes, I actually looked up this material for research purposes. I don't recommend it, but I can say that what I looked at was incomparably more extreme than Goblin Slayer. As a critic, you've got to at least get your facts straight. Anything else is at best ignorance and at worst purposeful dishonesty. So how about a more interesting take on these Goblin Boys, which features a bad boy YouTube title that'll bring in them clicks and is sure to rustle a few jimmies. I have several problems with this video, but its central point is at least intriguing to me. Basically, she states that the goblins lack depth, and that the show would be more interesting if the goblins had some level of complexity. She then goes on to specifically say that this show is about as flat and unnuanced as racial propaganda. Now here, the pedantic romantic is not claiming in any way that it's because the show is edgy that it's bad. She's claiming that the fact that it lacks depth makes it a poor story, makes it bad writing. But what if we just go from a bit of a different angle? Couldn't you just as easily say that these goblins may not be representative of people at all, but that they are instead emblematic of that which is an absolute evil? In this light, the story is about a traumatized man who becomes obsessed with facing a type of evil and finding the strength to try and destroy it. The grittier it gets, the more that evil is amplified, and the more of a challenge it becomes for the hero to overcome it. There's at least some sort of potential there. Would it be more interesting to make the villains complex? Maybe. To be honest though, the pedantic romantic doesn't make it clear how much of this story she's read or seen, and I don't know where this goes. We're both grasping onto one isolated piece of a story to make a qualitative assessment of a series. In judging whether we want to continue with the story or not, that's fine. In a critique of a series though, well, that's weak. At least if you're going to make broad statements about a series' thematic depth. Basically, all this is to say that things are often more complex than they seem, and that the next time someone calls something edgy, think about how they qualify that, because it tends to be a lazy buzzword, put in the place of substantial criticism in order to invalidate a show or to make it seem unworthy of discussion. Because the interesting part doesn't come from the buzzwords, and it doesn't come from the restrictions. It comes from the open discussion, and engaging with one another about a piece of media in a well-informed manner, and using specific terms and taking specific examples of events from the story to back up your point. Thank you, as always, to my patrons for supporting the creation of this video and all the other videos on my channel. The support you provide me is incredible and so motivating, and it means a lot to me. Thank you also to any newcomers or any just regular subscribers who tuned in for this one. I hope that you found something useful in it. I hope that you enjoyed it. I look forward to hearing from you in the comments below about whether you liked this one. If you liked it, give it a like. If you didn't like it, give it a thumbs down and tell me why. I hope that you have an awesome day, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.